Well, there was tech news last week, and despite the best efforts of my doctors, I'm still around to cover it, even if I wasn't quite up to getting on the podcast to do so. I'm kidding, of course. My doctors did great, but recovery happens to be a real jerk sometimes. Turns out everything your parents said about your body starting to fall apart after you turn 30, it was true. Anyway, the point is, I wasn't able to join with Landon and Wes on the Calling All Platforms podcast this week, and rather than just make them read my borderline incomprehensible notes on what I wanted to cover, I'm making this video. If all has gone according to plan, you may have been sent here from the podcast. If not, you should totally go check out the podcast. Is this audience cross-pollination? Am I doing this right? Anywho, as anyone who has listened to the podcast may be aware, I'm the resident Apple idiot around these parts, so we're going to start by covering a few pieces of Apple-related news. The first piece of news is that, as we mentioned on the podcast a few weeks back, there are new Beats headphones. These are the Beats Studio Buds Plus, in-ear, fully wireless headphones that are, in the simplest terms, the Beats brand version of Apple AirPods Pro. The noteworthy news is that yes, the transparent colorway that was leaked via an Amazon listing weeks ago was accurate, and that is frankly the color you should get. It's awesome. I don't know why translucent plastic electronics ever went out of fashion. The second is that, as expected, the Studio Buds Plus feature many of the same improvements as the AirPods Pro 2, including better noise cancellation, longer battery life, and improved transparency mode. Of special note, though, is that these are not using Apple's platform-specific H2 audio chips, but instead a Beats specialty platform chip which should enable close to the same functionality as the H2 on Apple devices and on Android devices as well. Basically, if you don't have an Apple device, get these. And even if you do, seriously consider these because the couple of features you miss versus the AirPods are handily cancelled out by the dope clear plastic shell. Now, Apple, give me translucent iMacs, you cowards. The other interesting development in Apple's world over the past few weeks was actually a fresh pile of new accessibility features that will be coming in the next major revision of iOS. Under normal circumstances, Apple would talk about these during WWDC, their developer conference that's coming up in about a week. So the fact that they chose to highlight these on their own early is actually pretty interesting. There were many features that will help make devices easier to use for a broad array of people, but as is usual, there are a number of features that are generally just very helpful even outside of accessibility contexts. For instance, Assistive Access will actually sort of enable you to recreate CarPlay directly on the screen of your device, allowing you to dock the phone to your dashboard in lieu of a built-in CarPlay-compatible system. Personal Voice is also going to enable you to create an AI voice that sounds like you directly on your phone using the machine learning hardware built into the A-series processor. While both of these do, of course, have strong accessibility advantages, they are also just interesting standalone features that you'll be able to find under the accessibility section in settings when iOS 17 launches later this year. And now we move on to some gaming news. Because even though E3 isn't a thing anymore, everyone is still planning to announce all their new stuff right around now. PlayStation showed off a PlayStation Showcase last week via streaming, which, in essence, just covered what you can expect in the near to mid-term for new games on the PS5. Here, I compiled a list. We can speedrun it in way less time than Sony did. Fair Games. Looks to be Watch Dogs meets Payday. Helldivers 2. Appears to be Starship Troopers meets Destiny. Immortals of Avium. Avium? Whatever. Seems like EA is retrying Forsworn. Ghost Runner 2 is basically Destiny with bikes. Phantom Blade Zero, Sekiro meets Hong Kong martial arts cinema, and it's a Phantom Blade game. If you've played those, you know what to expect. Sword of the Sea is from the creative director of Journey, and boy, can you tell. The Talos Principle 2 is a sequel, in the most sequel-y sense from the appearance of it. Neva, from the creator of Gree, who apparently designs games in lieu of going to therapy. Cat Quest Pirates of the Caribbean is a lighthearted cat-themed Zelda-inspired RPG, so if any of those buzzwords happen to trigger you. Foam Stars is Square Enix greenlighting a hero shooter clone of Splatoon for some reason. The Plucky Squire is a hybrid 2D, 3D platforming RPG that looks to be inspired by equal parts Mario and Zelda. Towers of Agazba appears to be a first-person city builder. Final Fantasy XVI is a Final Fantasy game. Alan Wake 2, that's a Remedy game. Assassin's Creed Mirage, it's an Assassin's Creed, yeah, you get it. Street Fighter 6, it is a Street Fighter game, I'll grant you, but there is a custom character story mode now. Tower of Fantasy is Sci-Fi Genshin Impact. Dragon's Dogma 2 is a Western fantasy RPG. It's a sequel to Dragon's Dogma. What do you want from me? And then Spider-Man 2, now with 100% more Venom symbiote. They also showed off some new PSVR 2 titles. What would you imagine is coming to Sony's VR platform this year? Let's see, we've got a Resi game, a zombie game, a military shooter, a bullet hell stage shooter, whatever the crap that Bungie game was, and Beat Saber. So, that's pretty much about what you'd expect. Sony also teased something called Project Q, which I can only describe as the Wii U gamepad, except it uses your home Wi-Fi instead of a proprietary near-field Wi-Fi network, and it's, for a PS5 instead of a Wii U. And well, I'll grant you that's a pretty strong advantage. What it looks like they've managed here is chopping a DualSense controller in half, mounting a screen between the halves, and then leaving the controller's battery in for a battery life that's even shorter than a Steam Deck. Which is interesting when you consider that the Steam Deck has an actual console inside, while Project Q is literally just a wireless display for your PlayStation strapped to a controller. In fact, doesn't Sony make a remote play app that does this already? They totally do. Doesn't that mean that this market's pretty well already covered? Look, if Project Q winds up being somewhere between $100 and $150, I can see the market for it. It's for the folks that want their PS5 in the living room next to the nice TV, but they also want the option to play games in bed on a decently large screen with a DualSense without having to buy a second console and hook it up to a TV in their bedroom. But that's not what it'll cost. It'll cost $300 to $400, and in a world where the Steam Deck exists, which I'll remind you, you can stream games as well as play actual pants games right on it given the presence of an entire computer behind the screen, that price would be stupid. So how successful this device will be will all depend on how out to lunch Sony is on the pricing, which, I'm sure it'll be fine. And that's my news for the week. Sorry again for the format disconnect here, but if it makes you feel any better, I can't walk up or down stairs properly, and I'm way more pissed off about it than you.